His heart wasn't the trespassing. It was Maddie's radiant smile, the one that vanished when they buried Catherine 3 years ago. She plays exactly like her mother, Marcus whispered, and the revelation hit William like a terminal diagnosis. While he'd been saving strangers, this man whose life he once saved but whose name he'd forgotten had saved his daughter's soul. Dr. William Hayes pressed his trembling fingers against the carotid artery of the deceased patient on his operating table, a 43-year-old father of 3 whose heart had stubbornly refused to restart despite 18 minutes of desperate efforts. The OR fell silent except for the flatline tone that seemed to mock his failure. Time of death, 11:42 p.m., William announced, his voice hollow as he stripped off his blood-soaked gloves and threw them violently into the disposal bin. This was his 3rd lost patient this month, an unacceptable statistic for Boston's most celebrated cardiothoracic surgeon. "Dr. Hayes, you did everything possible," his assistant surgeon offered meekly. William's ice-blue eyes flashed with barely contained rage. "Everything possible isn't good enough if the patient dies, Dr. Chen. Perhaps you've forgotten that." The younger doctor recoiled as though slapped. The hospital corridors seemed endless as William marched through them, his white coat billowing behind him like a ghost. Nurses and residents flattened themselves against walls to avoid his path. They'd all heard the rumors, how the brilliant Dr. Hayes had become a surgical machine after his wife's death 3 years ago, how he'd broken a resident's career with a single scathing evaluation, how he never went home before midnight. His Mercedes cut through the rainy Boston night, windshield wipers keeping frantic time like a metronome. Catherine had loved the rain. The thought ambushed him, unwelcome and painful. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The Hayes mansion loomed against the stormy sky, 17 rooms of cold marble and emptiness. The housekeeper would have left hours ago after preparing dinner for Maddie. His 12-year-old daughter would be asleep, having eaten alone again. William poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey in the crystal tumbler that had been a wedding gift, downing it in one burning swallow before pouring another. That's when he heard it. So faint at first, he thought it was the wind or his imagination. But no, it was unmistakable. The sound of piano keys, Catherine's piano, the instrument he'd locked away in the basement 3 years ago, unable to bear the sight of it after she died. The instrument he'd forbidden anyone to touch. The whiskey glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor as he followed the sound like a man in a trance. With each step down the basement stairs, the playing grew more distinct, halting, amateur, but with glimpses of a melody he recognized from his wife's repertoire. When he reached the door, left slightly ajar, the scene that greeted him through the crack nearly stopped his heart. Maddie sat at the gleaming black grand piano, her small fingers dancing across the keys. But she wasn't alone. Standing behind her, guiding her hands with gentle pressure, was a man William recognized with a jolt of fury, Marcus Jenkins, the hospital janitor. A man who had no business being in his home, touching his daughter, bringing the dead back to life through forbidden music. What froze William's heart completely, however, wasn't just the trespassing. It was Maddie's radiant smile, an expression of genuine joy that had disappeared when they buried Catherine 3 years ago. An expression he, despite all his wealth and position, had failed to provoke in 3 years of desperate attempts. "She plays exactly like her mother," Marcus whispered, and the revelation hit William like a terminal diagnosis. While he'd been saving strangers, this man, whose life he once saved but whose name he'd forgotten, had somehow saved his daughter's. Soul William's vision blurred red. "What the hell is going on here?" he roared, slamming the door open with such force that it cracked against the wall. Maddie leapt from the piano bench, her face draining of color. "Dad, you're home early. I can explain. Mr. Jenkins was just..." Maddie started, but William cut her off with a slashing motion of his hand. "You," he pointed at Marcus, who stood calmly beside the piano, showing none of the fear or deference expected from a man of his position, confronted by his superior. "How dare you enter my home without permission? How dare you touch my daughter? I'll have your job for this. I'll have charges pressed." Marcus didn't flinch. "Dr. Hayes, your daughter has a gift. She deserves..." "Get out!" William bellowed, advancing on the man. "Get out before I call the police." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, not fear, but something like pity, which enraged William even more. The janitor nodded once at Maddie, whose eyes had filled with tears, then walked past William with quiet dignity. "I'll see myself out, Dr. Hayes." When the front door closed, William turned to his daughter, who stared up at him with an expression he'd never seen before, a mixture of defiance and heartbreak. That made her look eerily like Catherine. "How long has this been going on?" he demanded, his voice shaking. Maddie lifted her chin. "2 months since I found Mom's spare key to the basement. And the janitor. How did he... His name is Mr. Jenkins," she said with quiet dignity that felt like a slap. "And he heard me trying to play by myself after I visited you at the hospital. He offered to teach me, the way Mom would have if..." Her voice broke. "If she was still here." William felt as though he'd been punched in the chest. "This piano is off limits. I made that clear when you locked away everything that reminded you of her." Maddie's voice rose. "You locked away her clothes, her books, her piano, everything except her pictures, which you can't even look at. It's like you're trying to pretend she never existed. That's not true. You buried Mom, and then you buried yourself in that hospital. You're never here, Dad, never. And when you are, you don't talk to me, you don't look at me." "I'm working to give you a good life," William shouted. "I don't want a good life. I want a father. I want to remember my mother. I want to play her piano because it makes me feel like she's still here." The words hung in the air between them like shattered glass. William stared at his daughter, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. Her dark hair tangled around her face, her eyes swollen and red-rimmed, her small body shaking with emotion. "Mr. Jenkins knew her," Maddie said, finally her voice dropping to a whisper. "He used to hear her play for the terminal patients in the oncology ward when you were in surgery. He said..." She swallowed hard. "He said I have her hands, her touch on the keys." William felt his legs threatening to give way. Catherine had played for cancer patients, without his knowledge, and this janitor, this stranger, had shared those moments with his wife when he hadn't. "Go to your room," he said, his voice strangled. "Now, Maddie." She moved toward the door, then paused beside him. "You can lock the piano, Dad," she said, with a wisdom far beyond her 12 years. "But you can't lock away what Mom left inside me." When she was gone, William collapsed onto the piano bench, surrounded by ghosts. His fingers hovered over the keys his wife had once played, the keys his daughter had been secretly learning, guided by a man he'd never spared a second glance for, until tonight. With trembling hands, he closed the fallboard over the keys, locking it again with the key he kept on his person at all times. But even as he did, he knew with devastating certainty that something had been unlocked tonight that could never be sealed away again. Upstairs, through the silence of the mansion, he heard the first muffled sob from his daughter's room, a sound that would haunt his dreams more than any flatlined monitor ever could. The morning light crept through the blinds of William's study as he sat motionless, still wearing yesterday's clothes. He hadn't slept. The shards of the broken whiskey glass remained scattered on the floor downstairs, a fitting metaphor for what his life had become. His phone had been buzzing incessantly. The hospital, a complex triple bypass scheduled for 7 a.m. Patients depending on his steady hands. Yet here he sat, hands trembling like a first-year resident. "Catherine," he whispered to the empty room. What else didn't I know? The photograph on his desk, the only one he'd allowed to remain visible, showed his wife on their wedding day, her dark eyes alive with promise, the same eyes that now stared accusingly from their daughter's face. William forced himself upright, mechanically preparing for work. When he passed Maddie's room, he paused. The silence felt oppressive. Should he knock? What would he even say? Before he could decide, his phone rang again. Dr. Chen, probably wondering where he was. William turned away from the door and descended the stairs, carefully avoiding looking at the basement entrance. At the hospital, whispers followed him through the corridors. Had news of last night's confrontation already spread? Impossible. Unless the janitor had... "Dr. Hayes." The voice stopped him cold. Marcus Jenkins stood before him, mop in hand, his uniform impeccable despite the menial nature of his work. "I believe we have unfinished business," Marcus said quietly. William glanced around at the bustling hospital corridor. "Follow me," he commanded, leading them into an empty consultation room. The moment the door closed, William rounded on him. "You had no right to enter my home or interfere with my daughter." "With respect, Dr. Hayes, your daughter sought me out," Marcus replied evenly, "after hearing her trying to teach herself for weeks." "And you just happened to be there?" William's voice dripped with suspicion. "I was emptying trash cans in the pediatric ward when she came to meet you for lunch. A lunch you cancelled without telling her." Again. The rebuke was subtle but unmistakable. William flinched. Had he forgotten another lunch with Maddie? The days blurred together in an endless parade of surgeries and consultations. That doesn't explain how you ended up in my home. Maddie was sitting at the children's piano in the playroom, trying to pick out a melody, the same one Mrs. Hayes used to play for cancer patients. Marcus's eyes held William steadily. She said it was the only song she remembered her mother playing. She wanted to learn it for the anniversary. Anniversary? William repeated numbly. Of her mother's death. It's next week. The floor seemed to sway beneath William's feet. 3 years next Tuesday. How had he not realized? She begged me to help. Her? Said she'd found a key to where the real piano was kept. Marcus's voice softened. I should have refused, but if you'd seen her face, Dr. Hayes. William sank into a chair, the fight draining out of him. How did you know my wife? I didn't, not really, but I heard her play. Every Thursday afternoon, in the oncology ward while you were in surgery, she played for people with no hope left, gave them something beautiful in their final days. Each word was like a scalpel to William's heart. Catherine had never mentioned this secret life while he was busy saving strangers. Why are you telling me this? William asked hoarsely. Because your daughter is drowning, Dr. Hayes. And that piano is her lifeline to her mother. William looked up sharply. You overstep your boundaries, Mr. Jenkins. Perhaps, but someone needs to. Marcus moved toward the door, then hesitated. There's something else you should know. Your wife was working on a composition before she died. For Maddie's 10th birthday, she never finished it. William stared at him in stunned silence. The sheet music is still in the piano bench. Maddie found it. With that, Marcus left, the door closing softly behind him. William's first surgery was a disaster. His concentration shattered. He nicked an arterial wall, nearly causing a fatal hemorrhage. Only Dr. Chen's quick assistance prevented catastrophe. Take the day, William, the chief of surgery advised after pulling him aside. Whatever's going on, fix it. I can't have you operating like this. Humiliated, William found himself driving home at noon instead of completing his usual 14-hour shift. The house was silent when he entered, the housekeeper having taken Maddie to school hours ago. His feet carried him to the basement door before he'd consciously decided to go there. The key felt heavy in his hand as he unlocked it. The piano sat in a pool of dusty light from the high basement windows, its sleek black surface still bearing the faint imprints of Maddie's small fingers. William approached it like it might bite. With trembling hands, he lifted the bench lid. There, among forgotten sheet music, was a hand-labeled folder for Maddie's 10th birthday, KH. The unfinished composition inside bore Catherine's distinctive musical notation with penciled notes in the margins, bridge needs work and transition too abrupt. The final page ended mid-measure, the melody forever suspended in incompletion. William closed his eyes, and for the first time since the funeral, he allowed the memories to surface. Catherine at this very piano, her fingers dancing across the keys, her face alive with passion. The music that had first drawn him to her at a university concert 20 years ago, the lullabies she played when Maddie was an infant. The phone rang, jolting him back to the present. Maddie's school, Dr. Hayes. This is Principal Thornton. There's been an incident with Maddie. She's refused to speak since her music teacher asked her to play something for the class. She locked herself in the practice room. We need you to come immediately. William arrived at the prestigious private school 20 minutes later, escorted by a concerned secretary to the music department. Outside a small practice room, Maddie's teacher wrung her hands. I didn't know it would upset her, she explained anxiously. She mentioned she was learning piano, and I thought... William waved her silent as he approached the door. Maddie? It's Dad. Silence. Maddie, please open the door. Go away, came the muffled reply. Go back to your hospital. That's where you'd rather be anyway. The words struck like physical blows. Is that what she thought? That he preferred the hospital to her, but wasn't she right? Maddie, he said, his forehead pressed against the door. I found Mom's composition, the one she was writing for your birthday. A soft intake of breath from the other side. I didn't know about it, he continued, aware of the staff watching but past caring. I didn't know about a lot of things, but I'd like to learn. Please. The lock clicked, and the door opened. A crack. Maddie's red-rimmed eyes peered out. You're not just saying that? She whispered. William shook his head. I think we both have a lot to learn about your mother, and maybe Mr. Jenkins can help us. Maddie stared at him in disbelief. Then, for the first time in what felt like years, she threw herself into his arms and sobbed. The drive home from Maddie's school passed in uncomfortable silence. William's hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his mind racing with questions. The daughter beside him felt like a stranger, a small, wounded stranger who somehow shared Catherine's eyes and the determined set of her jaw. "Does Mr. Jenkins come to our house often?" William finally asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. Maddie studied the passing trees. "Twice a week, Tuesdays and Fridays when Mrs. Abernathy leaves early. The housekeeper, of course, the one person who should have told him about this arrangement." William made a mental note to have a serious conversation with her. "And how did you convince her to let a stranger into our home?" "I told her he was my piano teacher," Maddie said simply. "And he is." "Maddie, he's a janitor." The look his daughter gave him was withering. "So? You always taught me to judge people by their character, not their job title. At least Mom did." The barb landed precisely where intended. William swallowed hard. "We need to talk about this properly," he said as they pulled into the driveway of their home. "There are things you don't understand, like why you locked away Mom's piano, or why you work so much you barely remember I exist." Her voice cracked. On the last word, William parked the car and turned to face his daughter. "That's not fair, Maddie. Everything I do, every surgery, every long night, it's all for you, for your future." "I don't want a future," she whispered. "I want a present, with my dad in it." Before he could respond, Maddie was out of the car, running toward the house. William sat frozen, her words echoing in his mind. Inside, he found Maddie already at the basement door, waiting. The unspoken question hung between them. "Go ahead," he said softly. She took the stairs 2 at a time, William following more slowly behind. When he reached the bottom, she was already seated at the piano, fingers hovering tentatively over the keys. "Can I?" William nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. Maddie began to play. It was halting, unpracticed, nothing like Catherine's fluid grace, but unmistakably the beginning of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Catherine's favorite piece, the piece she'd played the night he proposed. "How did you know to play this?" he asked when she paused. "Mr. Jenkins said it was Mom's favorite. He's been teaching me from recordings." She looked up, hesitant. "Did I get it right?" "Yes," William whispered. That's exactly right." He sat beside her on the bench, the closest they'd been in months. "Can you show me what else you've learned?" For the next hour, William listened as his daughter played fragments of Catherine's musical life, pieces he recognized from their early dating years, lullabies she'd played during pregnancy, and finally, the unfinished composition found in the bench. "This is where it stops," Maddie said, pointing to the incomplete measure. "Mr. Jenkins thinks she was going to build to a big finale, but..." Her voice trailed off. "We'll never know," William finished for her. Maddie's shoulders slumped. "I keep thinking if I practice enough, somehow I'll know how she wanted to end it." "Isn't that stupid?" William placed his hand over hers. "No, it's not stupid at all." The moment was interrupted by William's phone. The hospital again. He almost ignored it, but years of conditioning had him reaching for it reflexively. "Dr. Hayes," he answered, turning slightly away from Maddie. He saw her expression close like a slammed door. "William, we need you back here." Dr. Chen's voice was tense. "Your kidney transplant patient from last week. His body is rejecting the organ. He's asking for you specifically." William closed his eyes. Carl Patterson, father of 3, just like the patient he'd lost yesterday. "I'll be right there," he said automatically. When he hung up, Maddie was already walking toward the stairs. "Maddie, wait, I have to go, but..." "Of course you do," she said without turning around. "You always do. Someone might die if I don't." She stopped at the foot of the stairs. "And what about me, Dad? Am I not dying too, just slower?" The words hit him, like a physical blow. "That's not fair. Neither is growing up without a mom or a dad." She climbed the stairs without looking back. At the hospital, William moved through procedures with mechanical precision. Carl Patterson stabilized, the crisis averted. Afterward, William found himself wandering the corridors of the oncology ward, trying to picture Catherine here, playing for dying patients while he saved lives in the OR. "You look lost, Dr. Hayes." He turned to find an older nurse watching him curiously. Nurse Patel, if he remembered correctly. She'd been at Mercy General for decades. "Did you know my wife?" he asked impulsively. Her eyes softened with recognition. "Catherine, of course, everyone in oncology loved her visits." "I didn't know she played here," he admitted. "Not until yesterday." Nurse Patel tilted her head. She came every Thursday for almost a year before she got sick herself. Called it her secret ministry. Said you were busy saving lives with your hands while she tried to save souls with her music. William felt dizzy. Did she play with anyone else? A janitor, perhaps? Marcus? Yes. Sometimes he'd accompany her on difficult days, when we had young patients. She studied William's face. You really didn't know? No, he said hoarsely. I didn't know any of it. Nurse Patel touched his arm gently. There's a box in storage. Things Catherine left behind when she couldn't come anymore. I always meant to get them to you, but you seemed so unapproachable, William finished. She nodded sadly. I'll find it for you. 30 minutes later, William sat in his office staring at a cardboard box labeled Catherine Hayes Piano Music and Recordings. With trembling hands, he lifted the lid. Inside were dozens of handwritten sheet music pages, a journal, and a small digital recorder. William pressed play on the device and Catherine's voice filled the small room. Session 16, Oncology Ward. Emily requested Debussy today. Says it reminds her of the beach where she got engaged. Interesting how music becomes a doorway to our most precious memories. William's breath caught. His wife's voice, so alive, so passionate, discussing patients he'd never heard of, experiences she'd never shared. Why hadn't she told him about this part of her life? He opened the journal with shaking hands. The first entry was dated 3 years and 4 months ago. William cancelled our anniversary dinner again, 3rd time this year. He doesn't see what's happening to us, how his work is consuming everything. I love that he saves lives, but I fear he's losing his own in the process. And Maddie, she's growing up with a father who's physically present but emotionally absent. Today I decided to start playing at the hospital. If William won't come home to us, perhaps I can bring a piece of our home to him. William closed the journal, unable to read more. The truth crashed over him in waves. Catherine had seen his growing emotional absence years before her death. She'd tried to bridge the gap, to stay connected to his world when he had already begun disconnecting from hers. And now, years later, his daughter was trying to do the same thing, using her mother's music to reach a father who had buried himself in work to avoid facing his grief. Dr. Hayes, Marcus Jenkins stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Maddie called me, he said quietly. She's waiting for you at home. She wants to play something for you. William stared at the man who knew his wife and daughter in ways he never had. Why are you doing this? He asked. Why help us? Marcus's eyes held a deep, familiar pain. Because I know what it's like to lose someone and then lose yourself. Your wife saved me with her music before she died. Maybe she can save you both now. William clutched Catherine's journal to his chest as he drove home, Marcus's words echoing in his mind. The janitor had left without further explanation, leaving William alone with the painful truth that had begun unraveling his carefully constructed walls. The mansion loomed before him, its windows glowing amber in the twilight. Once he'd brought Catherine here as a new bride, promising her a lifetime of happiness within these walls. Now the house felt like a mausoleum, preserving the remnants of promises broken and moments lost. William found Maddie in the basement, sitting ramrod straight at the piano. Her face was tear-streaked but determined, reminding him so much of Catherine during her final days that his breath caught. Mr. Jenkins said you found Mom's things, she said, without preamble. William nodded, setting the box on top of the piano. There are recordings of her playing. Her voice. Maddie's fingers trembled over the keys. Can I hear them? Of course, William whispered, but made no move toward the recorder. First, he needed to hear whatever Maddie had been waiting to play for him. As if reading his thoughts, she straightened her shoulders. I've been working on something. It's not perfect yet, but her fingers descended on the keys, and William recognized the opening notes of Catherine's unfinished composition. But something was different. After the abrupt ending in the manuscript, Maddie continued playing, her small hands creating a bridge to something new yet hauntingly familiar. This is... William couldn't finish. My ending, Maddie said, still playing, or what I think Mum's ending might have been. Mr. Jenkins helped me understand her style, her patterns. We've been trying different variations. The melody soared and dipped, carrying echoes of Catherine's favorite pieces woven into something uniquely Maddie's. When she finished, the final note hung in the air between them like a question. What do you think? Maddie asked, vulnerability raw in her voice. William couldn't speak. Instead, he reached for the digital recorder and pressed play. Catherine's voice filled the room. Final notes for Maddie's birthday composition. I want the ending to feel like a conversation between us, like we're playing together even when I'm not there. William thinks I'm being morbid planning so far ahead, but mothers know things. I felt shadows growing inside me for months now. If I don't finish this piece, I hope someday Maddie will. She has music in her soul, just like... The recording cut off abruptly. Maddie stared at the device, her face ghostly pale. She knew, she whispered. She knew she was sick before the diagnosis. William sank onto the bench beside his daughter. The doctors said the cancer was aggressive, that there were no early warning signs we could have caught. But she felt it, Maddie insisted. And she didn't tell you. The accusation hung between them. Why hadn't Catherine confided in him? The answer came immediately, brutal in its simplicity. Because he hadn't been there to listen. I was distant even before she got sick, William admitted, the words acid on his tongue. Always at the hospital. Always one more surgery. She used to wait up for you, Maddie said quietly. Every night. I'd wake up sometimes and find her at the piano, playing softly until headlights swept the driveway. Each word was a surgical cut to William's heart, precise and agonizing. I didn't know. There's a lot you don't know, Maddie said, her voice suddenly older than her 12 years. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket and handed it to him. Mom wrote this the week before she died. She made me promise to give it to you when you were ready to hear her music again. William stared at the sealed envelope, Catherine's elegant handwriting addressing it simply to William when the music returns. His hands shook so badly he could barely break the seal. Inside was a single sheet of Catherine's personal stationery, the edges worn as if Maddie had unfolded and refolded it many times while waiting for the right moment. My dearest William, it began, if you're reading this, then our daughter has found a way to bring music back into your life. Don't be angry. With her for keeping secrets, she inherited that particular talent from me. William's vision blurred. There's something I never told you. Before we met, before medical school consumed your life, you were going to be a pianist. You played at that university concert where we first locked eyes. Your hands were made for healing, yes, but also for creating beauty. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that second part. The room seemed to spin. William had indeed played piano in college, quite well in fact, but had abandoned it for medicine, seeing it as an impractical dream. How could Catherine remember something he'd worked so hard to forget? I've asked Marcus to help Maddie if she shows interest in music. You remember Marcus? He played with the Boston Philharmonic before his accident. He knows what it means to lose music and find it again. Please don't let your pride push him away. He has much to teach you both. William looked up sharply. Marcus was a professional musician with the Philharmonic? Maddie nodded. Before the car accident that damaged his hearing, Mom knew him from before. They studied at the same conservatory. Another shock, another piece of Catherine's life William had never bothered to learn. The famous janitor was actually a former classical musician, someone from Catherine's past who'd shared her passion, and she'd entrusted him with Maddie's musical education in William's absence. There's more, Maddie said, pointing to the letter. My time is short, but Maddie's life stretches before her, full of possibility. Don't let her grow up in a house where music is forbidden and grief is the only guest allowed to stay. And William, my love, don't let the surgeon completely erase the man who once played Chopin with such feeling that I fell in love before you spoke a single word to me. That man is still inside you, buried beneath scalpels and schedules. Find him again, for Maddie's sake, and for your own. William's composure finally shattered. 3 years of suppressed grief broke through the carefully constructed dam of his professional detachment. He wept openly, shoulders heaving, as Maddie's small arms wrapped around him. I miss her too, Dad, she whispered against his shoulder. Every day. I've failed you both, William choked out between sobs. I couldn't save her and then I abandoned you. You're here now, Maddie said, with a forgiveness he didn't deserve. When his tears finally subsided, William wiped his face and looked at his daughter, really looked at her for the first time in years. Play it again, he said hoarsely. You're ending to Mom's piece. As Maddie began to play, William closed his eyes. The melody wrapped around him like Catherine's arms, at once achingly familiar and startlingly new. When Maddie reached the part she'd composed, William found his hands moving to the higher octaves, adding harmonies that emerged from some long-dormant part of himself. Maddie didn't falter, her eyes wide as her father joined her in completing Catherine's final composition. Together their hands moved across the keys, creating a musical conversation across time, mother, father, daughter, each voice distinct yet harmonizing in profound conversation. When the final notes faded, the silence that followed felt different, not The dead, heavy silence that had ruled their home for 3 years, but something alive with possibility. The moment was shattered by the shrill ring of William's phone. The hospital again. Maddie's face fell, the familiar disappointment already settling in her eyes. William looked at the phone, then at his daughter, at Catherine's letter, at the piano where they'd just created something beautiful together. For the first time in his medical career, Dr. William Hayes declined the call. The hospital administration didn't take William's sudden unavailability well. By morning, his phone had accumulated 17 missed calls, including 3 from Dr. Winters, the chief of surgery. The final message was blunt. Either you explain yourself by noon, or don't bother coming back. William stared at the phone. As Maddie ate breakfast across from him, a novel situation for them both. She seemed smaller in the morning light, dark circles under her eyes betraying her exhaustion after their emotional night. "Are you in trouble?" she asked, pushing her cereal around the bowl. "Nothing for you to worry about," William assured her, though his stomach churned with anxiety. 15 years at Mercy General, his entire career built within those walls, all potentially jeopardized by one declined call. "It's because of me, isn't it?" Maddie's voice trembled. "Because you stayed home instead of going back to the hospital." William reached across the table and covered her small hand with his. "No, sweetheart, it's because of choices I made long before last night." The doorbell interrupted them. William opened the door to find Marcus Jenkins standing on his porch, not in his hospital uniform, but in casual clothes that somehow made him look more dignified rather than less. "I thought you might need this," Marcus said, offering a paper bag. Catherine's favorite breakfast when she was troubled, cardamom tea and almond croissants. The intimate knowledge of his wife's preferences from a man he'd barely acknowledged until days ago sent a fresh wave of pain through William. "You knew her better than I did," he said quietly. "Differently, not better," Marcus corrected, stepping inside when William moved aside. "You shared a life, I just shared music." Maddie appeared in the hallway, her face lighting up. "Mr. Jenkins, did you bring the tea?" Mom always said it helped her think clearly. "That's exactly what she said." Marcus smiled, a private memory passing between them that excluded William completely. As they sat around the kitchen table, the strange new triangle of their lives settling into uncomfortable proximity, William's phone rang again. "Dr. Winters, for the 18th time, you should answer," Marcus said mildly. "Running from one responsibility to honor another isn't balance. It's just a different kind of absence." The words struck William with unexpected force. He excused himself and took the call in his study. "Hayes, what the hell is going on?" "Dr. Winters demanded without preamble. "We had 3 emergencies last night and you were unreachable." "I apologize, Richard. There was a family situation." "Family situation? For 3 years you've barely acknowledged having a family. And suddenly, it's an emergency!" The blunt assessment scraped against William's raw emotions. "My daughter needed me." A long pause followed. "Well, Carl Patterson needed you too. His transplant failed completely. He died at 3 a.m. The news hit William like a physical blow. Carl Patterson, father of 3, the man he'd stabilized yesterday, then left to be with Maddie. I didn't know," William stammered. "Of course you didn't. You were unavailable." Dr. Winters' voice was cold. "Look, Hayes, we all have families, we all make sacrifices. That's the job you chose." "My wife died 3 years ago," William said suddenly. "Yesterday I discovered she'd been hiding her symptoms because I was too busy at the hospital to notice she was dying right in front of me." Silence stretched between them. "I'm sorry, William," Dr. Winters finally said, his tone softening. "I didn't know, because I never talked about it. I never dealt with it. I just operated on strangers, while my daughter grieved alone." Another long pause. "Take the week," Dr. Winters said eventually. "Sort out whatever you need to sort out. But William, after that you need to decide if you're still a surgeon, because halfway doesn't work in our profession." The call ended, leaving William staring at the wall of medical diplomas and awards that had defined his identity for decades. 1 week to choose between the surgical career that had consumed him and the daughter he barely knew. When he returned to the kitchen, Maddie and Marcus were bent over sheet music, their heads close together as Marcus explained something about chord progressions. They looked up simultaneously, identical expressions of concern on their faces. "You don't have to tell us," Maddie said quickly. "We heard enough." William sank into a chair. "A patient died last night, someone I could have helped." Marcus's eyes held no judgment. and many lived in the years you dedicated to your work, including mine. William looked up sharply. What? 3 years ago. Aortic dissection during rehearsal. You were the on-call surgeon. Marcus touched his chest where a scar would be hidden beneath his shirt. I never mentioned it because you treat so many patients, and I didn't want you to feel obligated. The revelation staggered William. He'd operated on Marcus, saved the life of the man who now sat at his kitchen table teaching his daughter music. You knew who I was all along, William realized, just as Catherine did when she volunteered to play for patients. We're all connected, Dr. Hayes. Your work matters deeply. Maddie watched this exchange with wide eyes. You saved Mr. Jenkins's life? William nodded slowly, memories of the procedure returning, a routine emergency surgery to him, a life-altering event for the patient he'd never recognized. But you couldn't save Mom, Maddie whispered, giving voice to the guilt that had haunted William for 3 years. No, William admitted, his voice breaking. I couldn't. Some things can't be fixed, even by the best surgeons, Marcus said gently. Catherine knew that better than anyone. What do you mean? William asked. Marcus and Maddie exchanged a glance that sent alarm bells ringing through William's mind. There's something else in Mom's journal, Maddie said hesitantly. Something I think you should see. She retrieved the journal from where William had left it on the piano the night before, opening to a page marked with a pressed flower, a forget-me-not from their garden. Catherine's handwriting covered the page, more uneven than the earlier entries. October 18th, William read aloud. Second opinion confirmed today. Stage 4, metastasized to the liver and lungs, 6 months at best. Told William it was stage 2 with good prognosis. Can't bear to see him try to fix what can't be fixed. He needs to focus on Maddie when I'm gone, not waste our last months trying to save me with experimental treatments and false hope. William looked up, the world tilting beneath him. She lied about her diagnosis. The whole time, she knew you'd move heaven and earth trying to save her, Marcus said quietly. Pulling every string, calling in every favor, abandoning everything else to fight a battle that couldn't be won. That was my decision to make. William's voice rose in anguish. We could have tried alternatives, clinical trials. Dad, Maddie interrupted, her voice small. She wanted you to be her husband, not her doctor. She wanted to live whatever time she had left, not spend it in hospitals. The truth crushed William like a collapsing building. Catherine had denied him the chance to fight for her life because she'd known exactly what he would become in that fight, exactly what he'd become anyway after her death. A surgeon first, a human being second. She robbed me of the chance to save her, he whispered. No, Marcus said firmly. She gave you both the chance to say goodbye properly. The tragedy is that you didn't take it. William stared at the man who had somehow become the keeper of his wife's truth and his daughter's future. And now, Marcus said, rising from the table, you have 1 week to decide which William Hayes your daughter needs more, the brilliant surgeon who saves strangers, or the father she's been waiting for since her mother died. As Marcus moved toward the door, Maddie called after him, Will you still come tomorrow for our lesson? Marcus looked to William, waiting, and William found himself at another crossroads, uncertain which path would cause the least damage to what remained of his broken family. Yes, William said, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. The lessons should continue. Relief flooded Maddie's face, but Marcus's expression remained carefully neutral. Are you sure, Dr. Hayes? This isn't a simple housekeeping arrangement. I know what it is, William replied, surprising himself with the steadiness in his voice. It's my wife's final wish, and my daughter's happiness. After Marcus left, promising to return the next day, an uncomfortable silence settled between father and daughter. 3 years of emotional distance couldn't be bridged in a single night of revelation. What happens now? Maddie finally asked, her fingers tracing patterns on the kitchen table. I'm not sure, William admitted. I have the week off to figure things out. Are you going back to the hospital after that? The question hung in the air, weighted with implications William wasn't ready to face. I don't know, he answered honestly. Maddie nodded, disappointment and understanding warring in her expression. At 12, she was already accustomed to measured expectations when it came to her father's presence. Can I show you something? She asked suddenly. William followed her to her bedroom, a space he realized with shame he hadn't properly entered in months. While he paid the housekeeper generously to maintain it, he'd allowed himself to become a stranger to his daughter's private world. Maddie knelt beside her bed and pulled out a shoebox, its lid decorated with musical notes drawn in black marker. Inside were dozens of folded papers. "What are these?" William asked, taking the one she handed him. "Letters. To Mom." Maddie's voice was barely above a whisper. "I write to her when I miss her really bad, or when something important happens." William unfolded the paper, recognizing Maddie's handwriting dated just 3 days earlier. "Dear Mom, Mr. Jenkins says I'm getting better at the Chopin piece. My fingers still tangle on the hard parts, but he says that's normal. Dad caught us. Today, he was so angry. I wish you were here to explain to him why the music matters so much. Sometimes I think he forgot about you on purpose because remembering hurts too much. I haven't forgotten anything. Not your laugh or the way you smelled like vanilla after baking, or how you used to dance with me on your feet around the kitchen. Does Dad remember those things too? Does he ever talk to you like I do? Love, Maddie." William's hand trembled. "You've been writing to her all this time?" Maddie nodded. "Mrs. Abernathy said it might help. She lost her husband when she was young too." Another revelation. The housekeeper had been providing emotional support William had failed to give. "May I see more?" he asked. Maddie hesitated, then selected another letter, this one from nearly 2 years ago. "This one's hard," she warned. "Dear Mom, I had my first recital at school today. I played the piece you taught me before you got sick. Dad didn't come. He said he had an emergency surgery, but I think he just couldn't bear to hear me play your song. Ms. Phillips recorded it for me. When I got home, I played it in the laundry room with headphones so Dad wouldn't hear and get sad. Is it wrong? That sometimes I hate him for locking your piano away, for acting like you never existed. I love him, but I hate how he pretends everything is fine when nothing has been fine since you left us." Shame washed over William. He'd missed her first recital. Had there been others he'd forgotten or deliberately avoided? There was no emergency. "Surgery that day, was there?" Maddie asked softly. William closed his eyes, searching his memory. "I worked late on charts," he admitted. "I told myself it was urgent, but it could have waited." The truth hung between them, painful but cleansing. "I have one more I want you to see," Maddie said, extracting a letter from the bottom of the pile. It was dated the day after Catherine's funeral. "Dear Mom, they put you in the ground today." Dad held my hand, but he felt cold, like he wasn't really there. "After everyone left, he locked your piano and said we needed to be strong. But I don't want to be strong. I want to cry and scream and play all the songs you taught me until my fingers bleed." Dad hasn't cried once, not even when they closed the casket. Is he broken inside, am I? I'm scared I'll forget what you look like or how your voice sounded. Dad put away all the photos except the one in his office. It's like he's trying to erase. You please don't let him erase you, Mom. Please don't let him make me forget too. William couldn't bear to read more. He carefully folded the letter and returned it to Maddie's outstretched hand. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, the words wholly inadequate for the magnitude of his failure. "I know," Maddie said with that terrible, adult understanding that had no place in a child's eyes. "It's okay." "No, it's not okay." William took her hand, so small in his surgeon's grasp. "None of this is okay. I failed you, Maddie. Not just once, but every day for 3 years. You were sad too," she offered, still trying to protect him. "Even now." "Yes, but I'm the parent. My job was to help you through your grief, not hide from my own." He swallowed hard. "Thank you for showing me the letters. There's one more thing," Maddie said hesitantly. "Something I've never shown anyone, not even Mr. Jenkins." She reached deeper under her bed and pulled out a worn leather case. Inside was an old tape recorder, the kind Catherine had used to record her practice sessions. "Mom made this for me. The week before she—" Maddie couldn't finish the sentence. "She made me promise not to show you until I thought you were ready." William felt a chill run through him. Another secret. Another piece of Catherine he'd never known. Maddie pressed play and Catherine's voice filled the room, weak but determined. "Hello, my darlings. If you're listening together, then something wonderful has happened. You've found your way back to each other through music. William, my love, I know how you retreat into work when you're hurting. It's your shield against pain too immense to face. After I'm gone, you'll be tempted to bury yourself in the operating room. Please don't. Our daughter needs her father's heart, not just his providing hands." William's chest constricted painfully. "Maddie, my brave girl, be patient with your father. His heart breaks differently than yours, quietly, behind closed doors. He'll try to be strong for you, but sometimes strength looks like weakness. And sometimes the bravest thing is to play the music even when it hurts." Catherine's voice grew more strained, the effort of recording clearly taxing her failing strength. "I've asked Marcus to watch over you both musically. He understands loss in a way few people do. William, you saved his life, but you never knew that his hands, his beautiful pianist's hands, were damaged in the accident. He can guide but never again play as he once did. Perhaps in helping Maddie, he might find healing too. A painful cough interrupted her, followed by a shaky breath. My time is ending, but your duet is just beginning. The melody, I couldn't finish, is meant for both of you to complete, together. That's my final wish, not that you never forget me, but that you remember how to live fully despite my absence. The tape hissed into silence. William sat frozen, Catherine's voice echoing in his mind. All this time she'd anticipated his retreat into work, his emotional abandonment of their daughter. She'd arranged for Marcus, the very patient whose life he'd saved but whose name he'd never bothered to remember, to step in where she knew William would step back. When did you first listen to this? He asked Maddie. 6 months after she died, when you stopped coming home for dinner. Maddie's eyes held no accusation, only a sadness too profound for her years. I was so angry at you, Dad, for disappearing when I needed you most. William pulled his daughter into his arms, feeling her small body stiffen before gradually relaxing against him. I'm here now, he whispered into her hair. I'm listening. Now? As they clung to each other, the tape recorder between them, William made a silent promise to Catherine. He would find a way to be both the surgeon who saved lives and the father Maddie deserved, or he would walk away from the scalpel forever. The question was, after 3 years of emotional absence, could he still make that choice? Or had it already been made for him by the unheard melodies of his wife's final wisdom? 3 days into William's week of leave, Marcus arrived for Maddie's piano lesson to find father and daughter sitting silently at the kitchen table, the tension between them palpably. Is this a bad time? Marcus asked, his intuition finally tuned to emotional dissonance. No, Maddie said quickly, standing up. Dad just got a call from Dr. Winters. Marcus's gaze shifted to William, whose face had the vacant expression of a man watching his carefully constructed life crumble. I see. The Simmons girl's heart transplant has been moved up, William explained mechanically. Donor match came through unexpectedly. Dr. Chen can handle it, but it's your patient, Marcus finished for him, a child you've been treating for years. William nodded, the weight of responsibility evident in his slumped shoulders. Ella, she's 8. Been waiting 18 months for a compatible heart. And they want you to do the surgery, Maddie stated flatly, her voice carefully devoid of emotion, a skill she'd learned too young, watching her father distance himself from painful realities. I told them I'd call back. William's eyes sought, his daughters pleading for understanding. Neither of them fully comprehended. The underlying question hung unspoken. Would William choose the operating room again? Would he abandon their fragile reconnection for the familiar comfort of surgical precision? You should go, Maddie said finally, her small face a mask of practiced neutrality. Ella needs you more than I do right now. The selfless statement, so eerily reminiscent of Catherine's final sacrifice, pierced William's heart. Once again, someone he loved was stepping aside to allow him his surgeon's identity, understanding its pull even as they suffered from its consequences. Your lesson, William protested weakly, will still happen, Marcus interjected gently. Some things can. Wait, others can't. William stood, caught in the limbo between two callings. I should be back tonight, he said, knowing even as he spoke that surgeries like Ella's could stretch into the early morning hours. We can play together when I return. The empty promise echoed Catherine's recordings. How many similar assurances had he made to her in their final months? How many had he broken? Maddie just nodded, her eyes already turning toward the piano, the instrument that never disappointed her, never left her waiting by the window for headlights that came too late. When William had gone, his absence a familiar, a void in the house, Marcus sat beside Maddie on the piano bench. Would you like to talk about it first? He asked quietly. There's nothing to say, Maddie replied, fingers lightly touching the keys without pressing them. He's a doctor, that's what he does. And what do you do when he does that? Maddie's hands stilled. I wait. I pretend it doesn't hurt. I write letters to Mom. The simplicity of her answer revealed depths of loneliness that made Marcus close his eyes briefly. Start with Chopin today. Channel everything you're feeling into the music. As Maddie began to play, her small hands somehow extracting the precise mixture of beauty and sorrow the piece demanded, Marcus watched her face. She was Catherine's, daughter through and through, capable of transmuting pain into something transcendent. Across town, William scrubbed for surgery with practiced efficiency, his mind still in his basement with Maddie and Marcus. Dr. Chen briefed him on little Ella Simmons's condition, her excitement about finally receiving a new heart, the family anxiously waiting for William to perform the miracle they'd been praying for. "Everyone's relieved you came in," Dr. Chen said, as they prepared to enter the OR. "No one understands this procedure like you do." William nodded, but for the first time in his surgical career, the impending operation filled him with something akin to resentment rather than purpose. Not toward the innocent child on the table, but toward the life that had trapped him between impossible choices. Hours into the delicate surgery, William's hands moved with the muscle memory of hundreds of similar procedures. The donor heart, perfect, pristine, a miracle of matched compatibility, waited to bring life to little Ella's failing body. "She'll have a chance now," Dr. Chen murmured as they worked. "Thanks to you, she'll have a future." The words should have filled William with professional satisfaction. Instead, they triggered a cascade of memories. Catherine's hidden diagnosis denying him the chance to fight for her future. Maddie's letters revealing years of silent suffering. The recital he'd missed. The bedtime stories unread. The piano locked away while life continued its relentless forward march. "Dr. Hayes." Dr. Chen's voice penetrated his thoughts. "Are you all right?" William refocused on the exposed heart beneath his hands. "Fine," he lied, continuing the procedure with outward composure. When the surgery finally concluded, successful, the new heart beating strongly in Ella's chest, William should have felt triumphant. Instead, exhaustion and emotional depletion left him hollow as he delivered the good news to the Simmons family. Their gratitude was effusive, tearful. Mrs. Simmons hugged him, whispering, "You've given us our daughter back," while Mr. Simmons shook his hand repeatedly, unable to find adequate words for their debt. William accepted their thanks mechanically, his mind already racing ahead to the empty house waiting for him. It was past midnight. Maddie would be asleep. Another promise broken. He drove home in silence, the weight of his choices pressing down like a physical presence beside him. When he arrived, the house was dark except for a single light in the basement. William descended the stairs quietly, expecting to find the piano room empty. Instead, Marcus sat alone at the instrument, his damaged hands resting on the closed fullboard. "She waited until 11, Marcus said without turning around. "I told her to go to bed." Shame washed over William. "The surgery ran long." "They always do," Marcus observed without judgment. "Did the child live?" "Yes. New heart's functioning well." Marcus nodded. "One heart healed, another wounded. The mathematics of your life, Dr. Hayes." The blunt assessment struck William with unexpected force. "That's unfair," he protested weakly. "Is it?" Marcus finally turned to face him. Catherine understood this equation. She accepted it. "But Maddie is still learning how to balance the ledger of your divided heart." "I save lives," William said defensively. "Yes, but at what cost to the life entrusted to your care here?" Marcus gestured around the empty house. When Catherine asked, "Me to help Maddie. I thought it would be temporary, just until you found your way back to your daughter. It's been 3 years, Dr. Hayes." William sank onto the bench beside Marcus, the enormity of his failure overwhelming him. "I don't know how to be both the surgeon they need and the father she deserves. Perhaps you don't have to be both, not in the same way you've tried before." Marcus hesitated. "Do you know why I became a janitor after my accident?" William shook his head. "Because I couldn't bear to be around music without being able to create it myself. My hands," Marcus held them up, the subtle deformities visible only to a trained medical eye. "They look functional, but the nerve damage means I'll never play professionally again. After you saved my life, I had to decide. Would I spend the rest of my days mourning what I'd lost, or find a new way to live with what remained?" The parallel to William's situation was unmistakable. "Catherine knew you would face this choice," Marcus continued, "between the surgeon who saves strangers and the father who saves his daughter. She hoped you would find balance. But if you cannot, then I must choose," William finished, the realization settling over him with terrible clarity. Marcus stood, his presence having served its purpose. "There's something on the piano for you. Maddie left it before she went. To bed." After Marcus departed, William found a folded paper on the music stand, another of Maddie's letters to Catherine, but this one dated today. "Dear Mom, Dad went back to the hospital today. Mr. Jenkins says it's to save a little girl and I should be proud. I am proud, but I'm also scared that things are going back to how they were before. For a few days, I thought maybe he was really going to change. We played your song together. He listened to your tape. He looked at me like he was actually seeing me. Now I don't know anymore. Maybe saving lives is more important than being here with me. Maybe that's what you would want too. I just wish I didn't have to keep choosing between being proud of my dad and missing him so much it hurts. Love, Maddie. William's vision blurred as the true cost of his surgical brilliance finally became clear. He had one remaining day of his leave to make a decision that would change everything. For himself, for Maddie, and for the countless patients whose lives hung in the balance of his skilled hands. William didn't sleep. Maddie's letter lay open on the piano as dawn painted the basement windows with pale light. He'd spent the night alternating between pacing the empty house and sitting motionless at the instrument, his fingers occasionally brushing the keys without pressing them, when he heard Maddie's bedroom door open upstairs. He steeled himself for the conversation they needed to have, perhaps the most important of their fractured relationship. She appeared at the basement door in pajamas, hair tousled from sleep, momentarily startled to find him there. "You didn't come home last night," she said automatically, then registered his rumpled clothes from yesterday. "Or, you did? I came back after your bedtime," William said softly. "I've been here since." Maddie approached cautiously, noticing her letter still on the music stand. Her cheeks flushed. "You weren't supposed to find that, but I needed to read it." William patted the bench beside him. "Sit with me?" Reluctantly, she joined him, maintaining a careful distance. Even this physical gap between them was his fault, another casualty of years of emotional absence. "I'm sorry I missed our time together yesterday," he began. "It's okay, you had to save Ella." The practiced understanding in her voice broke his heart anew. "It's not okay," William said firmly, "and I need you to stop pretending it is. Your feelings matter, Maddie. Your hurt matters. Your disappointment matters." She looked up at him, confusion evident. He'd never invited her emotional honesty before, always rewarding her stoicism with absent approval. I was mad at you," she admitted hesitantly. "And sad. And? William prompted gently. "Scared. That everything was going back to how it was before." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "That you'd remembered you prefer saving strangers to being with me." The raw truth stabbed William deeply. "I've made you feel like you're less important than my patients," he said. Not a question, but a devastating realization. Maddie shrugged, the gesture heartbreakingly adult. "They need you more, like Ella." "No." William took her small hands in his. "Different isn't more. Yes, they need the surgeon, but you need the father, and I failed to understand that both needs matter equally." Maddie studied their joined hands. "Mom's recording said you retreat into work when you're hurting. Is that why you're never here? Because it hurts too much to be home without her?" The question, so insightful from a 12-year-old, left William breathless. "Yes," he admitted finally. "The hospital is predictable, clinical. I know exactly who I am there. And who are you here? A widower who couldn't save his wife, a father who doesn't know how to raise a daughter alone, a man terrified of failing the one person Catherine entrusted to my care." The confession poured out of him, 3 years of unspoken fear finally finding voice. Maddie's eyes welled with tears. "I'm scared too, Dad. All the time. That's why I write to Mum. Why I needed to learn piano. It makes me feel less alone." "While I left you more alone," William finished, the truth washing over him like ice water. They sat in silence, the weight of mutual confession hanging between them. Finally, Maddie spoke, her voice small but steady. "What happens tomorrow when you go back to work?" The question around which everything revolved. William took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about that all night. I spoke with Dr. Winters this morning." Maddie tensed beside him, bracing for disappointment. "I've requested a significant change to my position," William continued carefully. "Effective immediately. I'll no longer be taking emergency surgeries or on-call rotations." Maddie looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means scheduled surgeries only. Regular hours. Home by dinner most nights. Weekends off." Each condition felt simultaneously like sacrilege against his surgical identity and liberation from its constraints. "I'll still be operating, still saving lives, just not at the expense of being your father. Can you do that? Just change everything." Disbelief colored her voice. "Dr. Winters wasn't pleased," William admitted. "Said I'm essentially stepping down as head of cardiothoracic surgery, taking a demotion. But your career will continue differently." Some lives I won't save as a result. The admission was painful but necessary. Others might be lost that I could have saved if I were always available. I have to accept that reality. Maddie's expression turned troubled. Because of me? No, William said firmly. Because of us. Because there's no point saving others if I lose you in the process. Something shifted in Maddie's eyes. A flicker of hope so tentative it nearly crushed him. You really mean it? I do, starting today. William gestured to the piano. In fact, I called your school. You're taking a personal day. We both are. For the first time in years, he saw genuine excitement break through her careful composure. What are we going to do? First breakfast. Then I thought we might visit your mother. The cemetery was bathed in late morning sunlight when they arrived, William carrying a portable keyboard they'd purchased on the way. Catherine's grave was well maintained, but showed no signs of recent visits. Another of William's failures. I haven't been here since the funeral, Maddie admitted as they stood before the headstone. Neither have I, William said, setting up the keyboard on a nearby bench. Another mistake I'm correcting today. Together they cleared fallen leaves from the grave marker. William placed fresh flowers, forget-me-nots, Catherine's favorite, in the permanent vase. Then he motioned for Maddie to sit at the keyboard. Play for her, he encouraged, the ending you created for her composition. As Maddie began to play, William closed his eyes, allowing Catherine's music, now transformed through their daughter's hands, to wash over him. The melody was hauntingly beautiful, carrying echoes of Catherine's style while incorporating something uniquely Maddie's. When she finished, William sat beside her. Now, together, they played Catherine's unfinished piece, their hands moving. In complementary patterns, William's trained precision blending with Maddie's emotional intuition. When they reached the original ending point in the manuscript, they continued seamlessly into Maddie's created conclusion, their musical conversation bringing the piece to its final resolution. As the last notes faded into the cemetery's stillness, William felt something shift within him, not the absence of grief, but its transformation into something bearable, even beautiful. I think she heard us, Maddie whispered, tears streaming down her face. I know she did, William replied, his own eyes wet. That evening, Marcus arrived to find them still at the piano, William now guiding Maddie through a piece he'd played in college. Their shared concentration was so complete they didn't hear him enter. Marcus watched silently, witnessing the tentative rebuilding of connections severed by grief and absence. The music they created was imperfect, William's skills rusty from disuse, Maddie's still developing, but it held something his professional performances had often lacked, authentic emotional resonance. When they finally noticed him, Marcus saw something in William's face he'd never observed before, peaceful determination. You've made your decision, Marcus stated simply. William nodded. I have. The surgeon or the father? Both, William said with quiet certainty. Differently than before, but both. As they discussed the practical implications of William's choice, the career adjustments, the scheduling changes, the professional sacrifices, Maddie continued playing softly in the background, her music the soundtrack to this pivotal moment in their lives. Later, after Maddie had gone to bed, William walked Marcus to the door. Catherine would be proud, Marcus said, of both of you. William considered this. I thought changing would mean betraying my identity as a surgeon, but that was never my whole identity, just the part that didn't hurt to embrace. And now I understand what Catherine meant in her recording. The melody continues, differently but beautifully, even after loss. William extended his hand. Thank you for being what we needed when I couldn't be. As Marcus drove away, William stood on the porch looking up at the stars, imagining Catherine among them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, skeptical colleagues, adjusted expectations, the inevitable emergencies that would test his resolve. But for tonight, for this moment, the discord in his life had resolved into something approaching harmony. Upstairs, unknown to him, Maddie was writing a new letter to her mother, the first hopeful one in 3 years. 2 months after William's decision to restructure his surgical practice, the tentative new harmony in the Hayes household faced its first significant test. William sat in Dr. Winter's office, the chief of surgery's expression grave as he slid a patient file across the desk. James Thornton, 42, father of 3, complex aortic dissection with complications we haven't seen before. Dr. Winters leaned back, studying William's face. Chen tried yesterday, couldn't complete the procedure. Patients on bypass, medically induced coma. William's hands itched to open the file, but he already knew what this conversation meant. "Will you need me to operate?" "Yes." No apology in Winter's voice, just professional assessment. "Emergency surgery tonight, possibly extending into tomorrow morning." "I have plans with Maddie," William said, the words feeling strange in this office, where for 15 years, nothing had ever taken precedence over surgery. Her piano recital. I promised her. Dr. Winter's expression hardened slightly. "This man will die without your specific expertise, William. No one else at Mercy can handle this particular case." The familiar weight of life and death responsibility settled across William's shoulders. 2 months of regular hours, dinner with Maddie, weekends spent rediscovering his daughter, all suddenly threatened by the very reality he'd been avoiding. Sometimes, he was the only surgeon who could save a particular life. "I need to make a call," William said quietly. Alone in his office, he dialed home, stomach knotting as Maddie answered. "Dad, are you leaving soon?" "My recital's in 2 hours." William closed his eyes, picturing her in the blue dress they'd chosen together last weekend. "Maddie, sweetheart, something's happened." The silence on the line was deafening. "There's a patient, a complicated case that only I can—" "You promised." Her voice was small, controlled, the voice she'd developed over years of disappointment. "You specifically promised this one time." "I know." William pressed his forehead against the cool glass of his office window. "There's a father of 3. Without surgery tonight, he'll die. Dr. Chen already tried and couldn't—" "It's fine," Maddie interrupted, her tone suddenly flat. "I understand. Saving lives is more important." "Maddie, please, Mr. Jenkins is here for my final practice. I'll ask if he can come to the recital instead." Clinical, detached, mirroring his own professional demeanor with heartbreaking accuracy. "I have to go." The line went dead before William could respond. He stared at the phone, the familiar war between surgeon and father raging inside him. Except now, the battle lines were no longer clear. 2 months of reconnection with Maddie had changed something fundamental in him, making this choice far more agonizing than he'd anticipated. William returned to Dr. Winter's office. "I'll do the surgery," he said, resignation heavy in his voice. "But I need to leave for an hour first." Winters raised an eyebrow. "The prep team is already—" "1 hour," William insisted with uncharacteristic force. "The patient is stable on bypass. 1 hour won't change his outcome." To his credit, Winters simply nodded. 1 hour. At the prestigious Morningside Academy, Maddie sat backstage in her blue dress, fingers silently practicing the piece she'd perfected over the past month, the completed version of Catherine's composition that she and William had arranged together. Marcus sat beside her, his calm presence steadying. "He's not coming, is he?" she asked without looking up from her hands. "He called me," Marcus replied gently. "He's trying to make it for at least part of the performance, but he has to save someone." No question in her voice, just resignation. "Yes, a father like him, with children waiting at home like you." Maddie nodded, absorbing this parallel with the wisdom beyond her years that both impressed and saddened Marcus. She had grown, accustomed to weighing her own needs against the life and death needs of strangers. "Will you record it for him, like last time?" she asked quietly. "He asked me to. But Maddie, this is different from before. He's fighting to be here, even partially." She straightened her shoulders, adjusting the blue dress that suddenly felt too tight. "It doesn't matter. The music is what matters." When her name was called, Maddie walked onto the stage with perfect composure, scanning the audience briefly before accepting that the empty seat in the front row would remain empty. As she began to play, she closed her eyes, letting the music carry her away from disappointment and into the world she shared with her mother. William rushed into the auditorium 20 minutes later, still wearing scrubs beneath his hastily donned blazer. The usher tried to stop him. No entry during performances, but he slipped past, desperate to see at least part of Maddie's moment. He froze at the back of the hall as the notes of Catherine's composition filled the space. Maddie's small figure at the grand piano seemed to glow under the stage lights, her hands moving with confidence and emotion that stole his breath. This wasn't just technical proficiency. This was true musicianship, the kind Catherine had possessed. As the piece reached its conclusion, the ending they had crafted together during their recent reconciliation, William felt tears stream down his face. In that moment, the distance between his surgical identity and his fatherhood collapsed. Both were essential parts of who he was. Both involved acts of healing. Both required his whole heart, When thunderous applause erupted, William joined in, his heart swelling with pride. Maddie stood and bowed, her eyes finally finding him at the back of the hall. Her small smile, surprised, relieved, joyful, was worth every frantic minute of his rushed journey here. Backstage, he wrapped her in his arms. "You were magnificent," he whispered into her hair. "Your mother would be so proud." "You came," she said simply, wonder in her voice, "for part of it." "I'm so sorry I missed the beginning." Maddie pulled back, studying his face. "You're going back to the hospital now, aren't you?" William nodded, the weight of James Thornton's life pulling at him even as he held his daughter. "I have to, but I saw what mattered most. I saw you shine, Maddie." Something in her expression shifted, not the practiced understanding of before, but something more complex, more mature. "The man who needs you, what's his name?" The question surprised him. James Thornton. "Does he have kids?" "3, close to your age." Maddie nodded slowly, processing this. "Then you should go save him, so they don't have to grow up without a dad." The simple compassion in her statement humbled William completely. This was Catherine's legacy. Not the piano playing, but this capacity for empathy even in the face of personal disappointment. "I'll come directly home after the surgery," William promised. "No matter what time, and we'll celebrate properly tomorrow." "I know you will," Maddie said, and for the first time she sounded like she truly believed him. As William rushed back to the hospital, his mind remained divided. The surgeon already reviewing Thornton's complex case, the father still hearing the echoes of his daughter's music. For 15 years he'd believed these two identities could not coexist. Now he was discovering they must. The surgery lasted 14 grueling hours. James Thornton's aortic dissection proved even more complicated than anticipated, requiring every ounce of William's skill and experience. Twice they nearly lost the patient, only to pull him back from the brink through William's innovative techniques. Dawn was breaking when William finally closed, his body exhausted, but his mind strangely clear. As the team congratulated each other on the successful procedure, Dr. Winters approached. "Remarkable work," he said, genuine admiration in his voice. No one else could have saved him. Once, those words would have been enough, the ultimate validation of William's identity as a surgeon. Now they felt important but incomplete. "His children still have a father," William said simply. "And what about your child?" Winters asked, surprising William with his directness. "How is this new arrangement working?" "Really?" William considered the question as he scrubbed out, washing James Thornton's blood from his hands. "It's imperfect," he admitted. "Days like today expose the contradictions. I can't always be in two places at once." "Yet you tried to be," Winters observed. "I've known you 15 years, Hayes. The William of a year ago wouldn't have delayed surgery to see a piano recital. The William of a year ago was a better surgeon but a worse father. And now?" William dried his hands, bone-weary but resolute. "Now I'm striving to be good enough at both." When William arrived home, the sun was fully up. He expected to find Maddie still asleep, but instead discovered her at the kitchen table with Marcus, sharing breakfast. "You're still here," William said, surprised to see the janitor, no, the music teacher, he corrected mentally, in his kitchen so early. "Maddie asked me to stay," Marcus explained. "She wanted to play something for you when you returned." "No. Matter the hour." William looked at his daughter, overwhelmed by this gesture. "You waited up all night?" "Mr. Jenkins let me sleep a little," she admitted. "But I wanted to be here when you came home, to show you something." At the piano, Maddie unfolded a sheet of paper. "I wrote this last night after the recital. It's a new piece. I'm calling it Two Worlds." As she began to play, William recognized elements of Catherine's style, interwoven with something entirely new, a conversation between melodic surgical precision and emotional depth. The piece moved between moments of urgent intensity and peaceful resolution, neither diminishing the other. When she finished, she looked up at him with uncertainty. "Do you understand what it means?" William nodded, unable to speak around the lump in his throat. His daughter had composed a musical representation of his divided life, not as a conflict, but as a harmonious whole. "You saved him?" she asked, softly. "James?" "Yes," William whispered. "His children still have their father." "Good," Maddie said with simple certainty. "Then it was worth missing part of my recital." In that moment, William realized that the true surgical miracle of the past months had nothing to do with his work at the hospital. The real healing had happened here in this house, where a broken father and daughter had somehow found their way back to each other through music, honesty, and the bittersweet legacy of the woman they'd both loved and lost. 6 months after Maddie's recital, an envelope arrived from the prestigious Carlisle Young Musicians competition. William watched as his daughter's hands trembled opening it at the breakfast table, Marcus sitting across from them both, a position that had become natural in their evolving family dynamic. "I'm a finalist," Maddie whispered, disbelief coloring her voice. "They want me to perform in New York next month." The joy on her face made William's heart swell. Since his compromise with the hospital, scheduled surgeries mostly, limited emergencies, they'd established a new rhythm to their lives. Maddie's musical talent had blossomed under Marcus's continued guidance and William's newfound presence. "Catherine's piece?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer. Maddie nodded, eyes shining. "The one we finished together. And 2 worlds. They want both." William embraced his daughter, pride overwhelming him, yet beneath his joy lurked a shadow. The competition's date coincided with the anniversary of Catherine's death. The 3rd day of performances would mark exactly 4 years since they'd lost her. As if reading his thoughts, Maddie whispered against his shoulder, "She'll be with us there, won't she?" "Every note," William assured her, meeting Marcus's understanding. Gaze over Maddie's head. They never spoke of it directly, but both men were acutely aware of Catherine's continued presence in their lives, in Maddie's music, in the renewed harmony of the once silent house. That evening, reviewing the competition details at the piano, William discovered a name that made his blood run cold: Dr. James Harrington, renowned pianist and head of the Carlisle judging panel. "What? Is it?" Maddie asked, noticing his sudden tension. William hesitated. Should he tell her? The history between Catherine and Harrington was complicated. Fellow students at the conservatory, later rivals after a professional falling out that Catherine had never fully explained. "The head judge," William said carefully. "He knew your mother. They weren't friends." Maddie's face fell slightly. "Will that matter? For the competition?" "It shouldn't," William answered, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. "Your music speaks for itself." But as they prepared for New York, William's concerns grew. Marcus suggested changes to the performance pieces, subtle modifications that might appeal to Harrington's known preferences, but Maddie resisted. "Mom wouldn't change her music to please him," she insisted. "I won't either." The resolve in her voice, so like Catherine's, gave William pause. His daughter was no longer the wounded child he'd neglected for years. She was becoming a young woman with her mother's strength and something uniquely her own. 3 weeks before the competition, disaster struck. William was in surgery when his phone vibrated repeatedly with messages from Maddie's school. When he finally checked between procedures, his heart stopped. Maddie had collapsed during music class, complaining of severe headaches and dizziness. By the time he reached Boston Children's Hospital, his surgeon's mind was racing through worst-case scenarios. The neurologist met him outside Maddie's room, her expression grave. "The MRI shows a small mass pressing on her auditory processing center," Dr. Lowell explained, showing him the scans. "Given her mother's history, we're concerned." William stared at the images, medical training warring with paternal terror. "You think it's cancer? Like Catherine's? We need a biopsy to be certain, but the location is challenging. There's significant risk to her hearing, possibly permanent damage." The words struck William like physical blows. For Maddie, her musical prodigy, hearing loss would be devastating, but the alternative, ignoring a potentially malignant tumor, was unthinkable. Inside her hospital room, Maddie lay pale against the white sheets, an IV in her arm. Her eyes found William's immediately. "How bad is it?" William sat beside her, taking her hand. They'd promised honesty with each other these past months, no matter how difficult. "There's a mass in your brain. They need to do a biopsy." Maddie absorbed this, her composure remarkable. "Could I lose my hearing?" William nodded, unable to shield her from this truth. "It's possible. The mass is near your auditory processing center." "The competition," she whispered. "It's in 2 weeks. We'll have to withdraw," William said gently. "Your health comes first." "No," Maddie's voice strengthened. "The biopsy. How long is recovery?" "Maddie, you can't be thinking, 'How long, Dad?'" The determination in her eyes was pure Catherine. "Minimum a week, assuming no complications. But even then, you'd be weak, and if there's any hearing damage, schedule it for tomorrow," she interrupted. "That gives me 9 days to recover before we leave for New York." "Sweetheart, be reasonable." Mom never got to finish her music, Maddie said, her voice breaking slightly. I have to finish mine, for both of us. William recognized the futility of argument. His daughter had inherited not only Catherine's musical gifts, but also her stubborn resolve. I'll speak with Dr. Lowell, he conceded. The surgery was scheduled for 7 a.m. William didn't sleep, alternating between pacing the hospital corridors and sitting vigil at Maddie's bedside. At dawn, Marcus arrived, his face drawn with concern. I'll be here when she wakes, he promised William. Go change into scrubs. You shouldn't look like a worried father when they wheel her in. William nodded gratefully. Though hospital policy prevented him from participating in the surgery, Dr. Lowell had agreed to let him observe, a professional courtesy that felt like both blessing and curse. He would witness everything, powerless to intervene. The procedure lasted 4 excruciating hours. William watched from the observation room, every movement of Dr. Lowell's instruments sending waves of anxiety through him. When a small sample of the tumor was sent for immediate analysis, the pathologist's report came back with unexpected news. Benign meningioma, Dr. Lowell announced, visible relief in her posture. Not cancer. William's knees nearly buckled. Not Catherine's disease. Not the terminal diagnosis that had stolen his wife. But they weren't out of danger yet. The tumor's location still threatened Maddie's hearing. As Dr. Lowell carefully navigated the delicate brain tissue, William held his breath. A millimeter in the wrong direction could end Maddie's musical future. Forever. When the procedure finally concluded, the uncertainty remained. They wouldn't know about hearing damage until Maddie awoke. The recovery room was silent, except for the steady beep of monitors as William and Marcus waited. When Maddie's eyes finally fluttered open, William leaned close. Maddie, can you hear me? She blinked slowly, disoriented. Dad? Her voice was a whisper, but she'd heard him. An encouraging sign. I'm here, sweetheart. The surgery went well. The tumor was benign, not cancer. Relief washed over her face, followed immediately by the question William knew was coming. My hearing? We don't know yet. Dr. Lowell says we need to run tests when you're stronger. Tears filled Maddie's eyes. The competition isn't important. Right now, William said firmly. It is to me. Despite her weakness, Maddie's determination shone through. Play something, she whispered. I need to know if I can still hear music. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolling to a recording of Maddie practicing Catherine's piece. As the music began, they watched her face intently, searching for any sign of hearing impairment. Maddie closed her eyes, listening. After a moment, tears began streaming down her cheeks. What is it? William asked, heart in his throat. Can you hear it properly? Yes, she whispered. But it's different. Like hearing underwater. The notes are all there, but muffled. Dr. Lowell, checking in, confirmed their fears. The audiologist's initial assessment shows moderate hearing loss in the right ear. It may improve with time as swelling decreases, but I might never hear music the same way again, Maddie finished, a new kind of grief settling over her. In the difficult days that followed, William watched his daughter struggle with this altered reality. She insisted on practicing despite her weakened condition, growing frustrated when notes that once came naturally now sounded wrong to her damaged ear. I can't do it, she finally admitted, 5 days after surgery, slamming the piano lid down. In their hotel room, William had insisted on staying near the hospital for follow-up appointments. Everything's distorted. I can't hear what Mum heard anymore. The despair in her voice broke William's heart. Your mother's music isn't just about perfect pitch, Maddie. It's about feeling, about connection, about the story you're telling. But how can I tell the story if I can't hear it right? She cried, finally releasing the emotions she'd been controlling so carefully. William held her as she sobbed, remembering how he'd failed to do this when Catherine died, how he'd hidden in surgery rather than face his daughter's grief. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Maybe this is part of the story now, he said gently when her tears subsided. Maybe the music changes, but doesn't end. Maddie looked up at him, something new dawning in her expression. Like you and me. Changed, but not ended. William nodded, struck by her insight. Exactly like that. 7 days before the competition, they faced the decision William had been dreading. Withdraw or proceed despite everything. Dr. Lowell says your recovery is remarkable, he told Maddie. But New York would be exhausting, even if you were fully healthy. Maddie sat at the hotel room piano, fingers hovering over the keys. I need to try, she said simply. Not for the judges, not even for me. for Mum. And with those words, William understood that this competition had become about something far more significant than winning. It was Maddie's way of honoring Catherine's unfinished legacy, of proving that neither death nor disability could silence the music that connected them all. On the stage of the prestigious Carlisle Young Musicians competition, Maddie Hayes finally found the reconciliation she had been seeking. Despite her impaired hearing, she played with an open heart, uniting her mother's musical legacy with her own journey through pain. When the final notes of Two Worlds echoed through the auditorium, it didn't matter whether the judges understood the profound meaning behind the music. William and Marcus, both with tears in their eyes, knew that Catherine was present in every note, every pause, every transition. Dr. Harrington might have given Maddie only an honorable mention instead of first place, but when he announced, "She has the same indomitable spirit as her mother," he offered recognition far more valuable than any trophy. For William Hayes, the journey from brilliant surgeon to present father revealed the deepest truth of his life: that healing bodies and healing souls require the same commitment, the same courage to face pain. Standing beside his daughter and the man who was once merely the janitor, he finally understood that the music Catherine left behind wasn't just a series of notes on the piano, but a continuous symphony connecting all those she loved, imperfect, sometimes dissonant, but irrevocably beautiful in its shared humanity. And you, how much longer will you keep running from your own emotional wounds? How many times have you put work, routine, or excuses before the relationships that truly matter? William and Maddie's story shows us it's never too late to change, to reconnect, to finally listen to the music that's always been there waiting for you. What part of your life have you kept locked in the basement, afraid to face the emotions? It awakens. Your life is also an unfinished composition, waiting for you to have the courage to complete it. The people you love are waiting, just as Maddie waited, for your authentic and complete presence. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't wait until something is lost forever. What decision will you make today to reconcile the two worlds of your own life? If this story touched your heart, don't keep that emotion to yourself. Subscribe to the channel now and activate notifications so you won't miss any of our transformative stories that go far beyond entertainment. They can change how you see your own relationships. And if you want to continue this emotional journey, click on the video that's appearing on your screen right now. Billionaire paid $500 million for 10 perfect women to have his children. A story that will challenge everything you think about love, money, and the value of genuine human connections. Continue with us on this journey of stories that don't just entertain, but transform.